Back in about 1977, I was living out in California, Piru, California, to be exact, with Kitty O'Neill. And over the years, because I worked with a lot of stunt people and a lot of daredevils, I received many calls from people that want to do crazy things. Some of them are good, some are just plain suicidal. I would not want anything to do with them. But in this particular case, this person that called me, he introduced me as the human fly. And I said, well, I never heard of you. And he says, rather indignant. He said, what do you mean you never heard of the human fly? And he went on, he wanted to start talking about his body is 60 or more percent made out of steel, and he's indestructible, and, just went on and on and on, trying to impress me with that. I says, so why are you calling me? I want to jump, he says, I want to jump over 36 buses. And I says, well, why is that? He says, because I'm 3 times better than Evel Knievel. And he had told me that before that he had wing walked on a airplane, actually a huge passenger plane, and he told me the story about that and how the rain got him and the hail and almost killed him. And anyways, he went on and on. I says, listen, I don't have a lot of time right now. Why don't you call me when I get back to Minneapolis in a couple of weeks? And I left him with my phone number. Well, bang, bang, bang on the door, and here is this guy who introduced me to him as engineer, and he was the human flies engineer, and he had some drawings. He had some ramps, and he had a drawing of a Harley Davidson with a couple rocket motors on it. And I said, so why does he want to jump 36 buses? Why don't you jump 26 buses? Well, he wants to jump 36 buses. I says, how far does he have to accelerate and to land? And I says, go figure. He's going to have to hit that ramp at 80 miles an hour. He's going to have to stay on it for at least a couple seconds. He's going to be planted right in that concrete wall, about 50 feet up. And he says, well, what should you do? What do you think? I said, why don't you jump over 26 buses? We'll put up an airbag, and we'll put up a big net. And he's going to crash. He's going to land in that net if he makes the jump. Well, at that point, we agreed on a price. I got a contract in the mail. I signed an agreement. And in the agreement was that I was going to, they're putting half down, and I was going to get the rest of the money when I flew out to Montreal. Well, so I got to work, and I built the bike, and while I was working, I received a phone call from an insurance company. And he says, boy, Kai, you're sure bringing me a lot of business. I said, so what do you mean by that? He says, well, Lee Taylor, who owned the rocket-powered boat, was going to go after the water speed record in a motor that I had designed for him. And he said they took $1 million life insurance policy out of him, and they also took one out in the human fly. And I says, oh, that's rather interesting. He says, what do you know about the human fly? I says, nothing. I says, I've talked to a couple guys a couple times. I haven't met him. I've talked to him on the phone, but I don't know anything about him. Well, a few days later, when the bike was done, totally done, and the next day, which I was going to test the motorcycle, I received a call from the guys that had given me the money and asked me if the bike was done. I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to test it tomorrow. He said, under no condition do you test that bike tomorrow. I said, what do you mean? I says, what you don't understand is if there's not enough pressure in the tanks and you don't flow enough fuel, the bike's going to go nowhere. It's going to sit there. Or if there's too much, he hits the throttle, he's going to be off the back end. He won't be able to. I have to test it. He said, I don't care. You do not test that motorcycle. Well, I'm not real good at listening to anybody, so the next day we took the motorcycle and strapped it in the back of my Toyota pickup truck and hit the throttle on that thing. And luckily, he wasn't on that bike because he would have been off the back end of it. Well, now I had another surprise. I thought I was going to be delivering that bike. It was going to go in a crate and flown. And here I got 2 guys banging on my door that told me they're going to escort me to Montreal, Canada, because of 2 things. 1, he was afraid they couldn't get it across the border. 2, they were concerned about me meeting with the management of the place at the stadium there. Well, my girlfriend and Tim Keslak we rode up there in the back seat of that car all the way up there. And when we got there, they brought us to a meatpacking place, and which looked like a meatpacking place at least. And instead of bringing us to the front door, they brought it to the back door. And they opened up the door, and here's a table with a number of gentlemen sitting there that in suits that you might have some concern being around. Let's just say that. And they said, who speaks English, who speaks Italian, who speaks French? As it ended up, we didn't speak English, so I had no idea what they even talked about. So they never even asked me one question. Meanwhile, there was a gentleman sitting next to me, a rather well-built guy. I asked him what his name was, and he says, my name is Mercury. And I says, so what do you do around here? And he says, I make cement shoes. Well, I don't know if this guy is kidding me at this point, but I was concerned about the people I was around that I did not know. Well, meanwhile, Dar Robson and Jim Deast and his wife flew into town, and we had done a number of promotional things because this thing was going to be in conjunction with a discotheque show, and they had a number of big name disco queens that were going to sing in this show, and the last thing was going to be the motorcycle jump. So we were there for like 9 days and stayed at the same hotel, and we'd eat there and then go downstairs to the bar and they'd have a beer. Finally one day the bartender says, boy, you guys have sure been around here for a long time. And I said, yeah. He says, we're doing a little bit of promo work. And he says, well, who are you working with? I said, the Human Fly Spectacular. And he says, you know who those guys are? And they started telling me some stories that I started really getting concerned about. I kind of thought they belonged to the underworld, and I'm not sure if they did or not, and I'm not sure, but we were told some things that really got me scared. So I went up to our hotel room, and I called them up, the fellows in charge of finance, and I said, you know, you guys owe me the money that you're supposed to give me when I got to the airport. I want it tonight, or the next call I get, I'm going to be from the Bahamas. He says, what do you mean from the Bahamas? What are you going there for? I says, I want my money or I'm leaving. And he says, you would not dare. And I said, you don't know me. 11 o'clock tonight or I'm out of here. Well, bang, bang, bang on the door. Guy came in, threw money on the bed there, slammed the door, and he, don't you leave. Well, now we're all really concerned about what's going on. The next day, they picked us up in a limo. They brought us there, and I walked in, and here the ramp was changed for the angle. That ramp was changed. And the receiving ramp, which was supposed to be with plywood all the way across, right to where the ramp was, instead the ramp was up here with all X'd out steel. In other words, if he didn't make the jump, he was going to hit that steel. And I says, I don't like what's going on. He ain't going to jump here today. Yeah, the guy said, Dars, yeah, this don't look good at all. Well, a little bit later, the guys come out and says, well, what do you think of the ramps? And I says, he's not going to jump here tonight. He says, what do you mean he's not going to jump around here? I says, because you didn't build that the takeoff ramp or the receiving ramp the way the drawings were shown to me. Well, meanwhile, the show starts. And the disco queens are all singing. And as I started looking around, I noticed there was only about 1,500 people in this huge stadium with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of promotion and radio and TV and ads. And that's all the people that came there. Why, I have no idea, but you can kind of figure out that why that didn't happen. Right after the show, the guys came back out because we were just standing there. And he said, put fuel in that bike. And I said, I'm not putting fuel in that bike. And I'm not kidding you, and there's witness by the guys who were with us at the time. The entrances, there was guys standing with baseball bats. And Dar Robson said to us, he says, well, it looks like they're going to play baseball. And Jim D says, yeah, look at all the baseball bats. And Dar says, yeah, they're going to play baseball with your head. Well, now we are really scared. And it's cold, real cold. You could see her breath, and we were all just huddling in the middle of this thing. And, we're just going, what are we going to do? We're going to run out of this place? We didn't know what to do. And now the people are starting screaming and shouting and not negative, just they're not happy. The show's not going forward. And the guys came out again, and he says, what do we got to do here to get this thing fueled? And I says, tear up the plywood off the buses and make a receiving ramp. So at least if he don't make it, he'll shoot up the side of that other ramp. Well, they did that. And it took some time, and the crowd was really on edgy, and they were really mad as heck. All of a sudden, here's this music, and there's smoke come out of this entranceway, and out walks the human fly. He's got a cape on. He's got a mask on. You have no idea who this guy even is. I don't know if I've met him or not before. And I looked at him, and he come up to me, just a foot away from me, and just, what do I need to do? And he's glaring at me. And I looked into his eyes like he was not even there. Well, I said, sit on the bike, flip the red switch up, and twist the throttle. Now, mind you, this guy had never ridden this motorcycle. He sat on it when we had some pictures that were taken, but as far as riding it, best of my knowledge, he never did. Well, luckily, he did not twist that throttle wide open. He just came out very slow, and the bike starts coming, and then towards the end, he came out with more throttle. Well, it didn't have the inertia, so the best thing that could possibly happen is the bike dropped backwards, and what it did, it went right through this plywood. Plywood flying all over, parts flying all over. I saw a wheel go up in the air, and I wouldn't bet a penny that the human fly was still alive. At that point, we all ran out the door. We went and got a cab, went to the airport, got a rental car, drove down to New York. The next morning, the human fly is swatted in the newspaper articles, and a lot of negative things about the group, who they were, and I'm just going, boy, we were sure lucky to get out of that place and get away from those guys. A couple of weeks later, I'm back in Minneapolis, and I received a phone call from a guy who called himself Rick Rochek. And he says, this is Rick Rochek. He says, Kai Michaelson, you saved my life. You saved my bacon. I said, what do you mean saved your bacon? You saved my life. Did you know they tried to kill me? I said, did you know they had $1 million life insurance policy on you? Well, he said a few choice words and things like that. We talked a little bit longer. And after that, I asked him, I said, so did I ever meet you there? He says, yeah. He says, I was the guy you talked to that was mixing some meat there with him. They were pouring these crates of meat in. And I remember him as being a tall guy, slim guy. But to this day, I believe that Rick Rochek is no longer around. People looked for him for years, and he just plain disappeared. I have a feeling that I'm probably one of the last people to ever talk to Rick Rochek.